Hello and welcome back to Sceptic Takeout. It's episode 5 already. I can't believe it. It's gone so fast. Anyway, in this special episode, I'm going to be looking at some of the podcasts and YouTube shows that inspire me. I hope that you see something amongst these that will inspire your own creativity and interest too. So we have a nice relaxed episode. Sit back, relax and enjoy some of the best content that these creative and wonderful people can offer you. Like, subscribe and set notifications. You can find us on Facebook for all of the most up-to-date news. There's not going to be much preamble today. We're just going to dive into some great shows. We're not going to be looking at them in any particular order. It's not a top 10 list. They are all brilliant. I am, however, going to separate two special mentions from the bulk of these amazing shows, but I'll leave them until the end, and you'll just have to wait to see what is so special about them. All the links for the channels and the individual videos can be found in the description below. I think it's only fair to kick off with the ultimate reason as to why I am here. The ACA produces several shows covering a wide range of topics, and they are the reason that I am aware of this platform at all. Full disclosure here, I am a member of and a volunteer for the ACA, but that's not why they're appearing on this show. This is. I have spent many years talking to theists and people who make supernatural claims. I even spent a while as a resident skeptic in a ghost hunting group, much to the displeasure of those trying to fool the public. But that's an entirely different show. The long and the short of it is that until relatively recently, my platform has been conversations. Going back over 25 years, this was in person, then via websites, and eventually by social media. But it was chancing upon Matt Dillahunty on the Atheist Experience that first opened my eyes to using YouTube to connect with your audience. So we're going to start with the Atheist Experience, which is a weekly call-in show where theists are given priority to call in and talk about what they believe and why. The main anchor is Matt Dillahunty, and they have a range of guest hosts. Conversations range from questions about the definition of atheism to philosophical exchanges about the nature of God. Enjoy this clip from the Atheist Experience.
What do you mean? I love your show.
What do you mean you've been in the presence of God? I don't know what that means.
He comes whenever I want to talk to him. He can actually appear for me.
And he talks to you and answers questions?
Well, I have to purify my heart, and I have to be serious, and my question has to be precise.
Okay.
It can't be dizzy in the head, which I tend to do. And before I talk to him, sometimes it will take days because I have to get rid of the selfishness and the pride. And getting rid of pride is like extremely hard.
Well, it seems that there's a way that we could test this. And that is...
Yes, he's right here, right now.
God's here right now?
What would you like to ask him?
Ask God what you should say to me to convince me that he's real.
He loves you very much, and you're doing an excellent job for him.
Yeah, that is not remotely the right answer. So I guess we've tested.
You don't understand the job he's doing.
No,
you're doing this excellent job.
No, Laura, you misunderstood the thing. I asked you to ask God what you should say to me to convince me that he's real, and you replied with something that did not convince me that he was real. So either you're wrong or God's wrong. Which one is it?
Oh, well, your heart has to be open to love.
My heart is plenty open to love, but that is also something that you should not have said. See, if God were real, God knows me, right?
No, I'm not.
If God's real, God knows me, right?
Yeah.
And God knows exactly what would change my mind, right?
Oh, you think it's a simple thing.
No, I'm asking a question. Does God know what would change my mind?
It's time and much study and much.
I've done more time and more study on this subject than probably any believer you're likely to run across. And so, yet that's another. You have access to God, Laura. Why would you ever respond to me without asking God what you should say first? Because if God wants you to say certain things and you're saying the wrong things, aren't you doing a disservice to God?
No, you're assuming that what I said was not what he said because it's not what you're accepting.
No. See, acceptance was included in the question. So either you don't understand logical reasoning or God doesn't understand logical reasoning. Which one is it?
Is love logical?
I think it's you that doesn't understand logical reasoning.
Let me try something, Matt. So
go ahead, Drag.
You have access to an omnipotent, 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 omnipresent deity, correct?
Correct.
Laura? Okay. And
yes.
This deity would presumably know everything about me, right?
Yes.
And you having access to this entity who knows everything about me can and will pass that information to you, correct?
Oh, no.
No.
Not
okay.
everything.
Not everything. What about simple?
To every individual, it is a miracle that you come to the understanding of him.
Cool.
And I am a human being, and no matter what he says to me, there is no way I am physically possible of presenting to you the information that will bring you to his heart.
No. That's not what Drag. That's not what Drag is asking. That's not what Drag is asking. Let me try this. If Dragnot were to think of a number between 1 and 1,000,000, would God know what number Dragnot is thinking of?
I would hope so.
And if you ask God to tell you what number Dragnot is thinking of,
would he answer that? No, he wouldn't give me that information. He doesn't play games.
Why not? Ask God why. Ask God why he won't give you that information.
It's really weird because that would convince me.
Like I'm thinking of a number.
I don't think that would.
It doesn't matter what you think. It matters what we think and what God thinks. You are irrelevant. You are the conduit to God. You're calling in to say that you are the conduit to the creator, governor, and Lord of the universe who knows everything. It doesn't matter what you think.
So my personal credulity is based on what you are convinced of?
Each of us are thinking of a number between 1 and 1,000,000. Ask God what number we're thinking of or hang up.
I'm sorry, you didn't get my point.
Your point's incoherent. I'm not sure how else to get that across to you. Like this, there's a reason I'd asked Laura that question.
Yeah.
Right. It's like and Matt, you saw where I was going with that, and
like a freight train, and Laura didn't. God didn't even clue her into what she was getting into when she called. So all you people who think you can talk to God, before you dial the number to call us, ask God if you should call us, because if that was part of God's plan, then I think God's plan is to continue demonstrating that there's no rational reason to think that he exists and that his advocates look like buffoons. That's got to be God's plan because that's what's happening. God is punking you. If God's telling you to call this show and knows what we're going to say and knows what we're going to ask, knows what would convince us, what would change our mind, and what number Drag and I are thinking of, and God wants you to call in to say that we're just closed to love, bullshit. I've been loved. I love lots of people. I have special loves. Oh, you're just not open to God's love. No. Those are all post hoc rationalizations. That's you making up excuses for why you can't do the shit you claim you can do, which is get an answer from God. Oh, well, God, there's nothing that would change your mind. Well, then that's what you should have said. If it's true that there's nothing that would change my mind, then when I ask God, hey, what could I say that would change my mind? And he'd say, nothing. Hell, that would have been closer to accurate than anything that you spewed forth from here. from your brain?
People asking what number I was thinking of. 58. That was the number.
Yeah, mine was 438,729. But that's why I went from one to a million. And if you hit both of them, like if you'd have spewed forth both of those numbers in our heads,
I would have had to take a step out. I would have had to excuse myself.
I would have spent the next week in serious contemplation as a magician, as a mentalist, trying to figure out. I mean, that structure is impossible for me to merely think of a number, communicating it to no one, writing it down nowhere, and for you to just tell me what the number is. I still couldn't conclude that it was God, but you would have access to some sort of power that is beyond my comprehension and beyond anything that's ever been demonstrated anywhere. Instead, what we got was, here's somebody who thinks they talk to God, and when they talk to God, they get crap answers.
The Atheist Experience is certainly the ACA's primary production, but it's not their only one. Other shows they produce are the non-profits, Secular Sexuality, Talk Heathen, and Truth Wanted. I'd love to show you clips from them all, but we haven't got time. I will, however, share with you a brief description of the shows. Please go and check them out. I cannot recommend the ACA productions enough. Secular Sexuality's YouTube page says, acceptance, education, and fun is what we strive for. We lay the intersection of sex and religion and occasionally ourselves bare. Openly and honestly. We discuss a wide range of topics each week, removing the shame and reclaiming what has been natural to us all along. The Non-Profits is the only ACA production that is pre-recorded, and it's a round-table discussion about current affairs. It is a panel of hosts who all bring their unique insights to the discussions. Truth Wanted is described on its YouTube page as a show about getting to the bottom of beliefs, whether it's karma or Christ, Bigfoot or crystals. Truth Wanted would like to know how you know it's true. Its host, Objectively Dan, is joined by a different guest host each week who vary from YouTube content creators, activists, and on occasion even well-known actors. The final ACA show I want to share with you, throwing restraining all bias straight out of the window, is my favourite. Talk Heathen, like the Atheist Experience, is a call-in show that asks what people believe and why. Originally set up to facilitate longer conversations via encouraging repeat callers, there have been some really emotional moments in the show's relatively short history. Hosted by regulars Eric Murphy and Vila Bianca, with the occasional guest, the show is generally more laid back than the Atheist Experience, and I hope you enjoy the following clip. And a little later, we'll be returning to Talk Heathen with probably the most inspiring caller I have ever heard on a call-in show. You can find links to all the ACA programming in the description below. Please go and check them out.
So I was the one in the chat at the C'est La Vie just before Christmas, and I had mentioned that I was a fairly recent, well, actually in-process deconvert from theology. In fact, I mentioned I was a church planter, and that...
Oh, I remember you. Yeah. Well, welcome to the show.
And yeah, you guys were so amazing with me. I had mentioned the purpose of this call today was kind of came out of what was in that chat, and you and Eric were really pleasant to me in the chat, and I could not wait for y'all to come back to another show so I could call. But the purpose of the call is that my brother did commit suicide in October, and it's the first time I'm dealing with death post theology, and on my own personal, and I'm really kind of having a bit of a challenge in processing that. In addition, my mother, who found him hanging, is now living with us, and she comes from a religious type of perspective, because that's pretty much where I came from. And it's been interesting because, she's having instances of, well, the dog barked this particular way, so that must be Eric's, telling us something or something. And I'm like really struggling with that. Eric ceased to exist. So, but anyway, that's pretty much
Yeah.
it. I'm not here to have kind of a debate. Just want to get some insight from the people who I respect.
Absolutely.
I think the most important thing that I would want to stress is there's no wrong way to grieve. What you go through and the process that you go through is your process. And so this pain, this hurt, or, you know, this moving back and forth when it comes to dealing with your mom, dealing with your own views on it, there's not a deadline and there's not a wrong way to do it. Well, there are less healthy ways, but just know that we're not judging you, and we're not expecting, you know, don't pretend that we're on your shoulder judging like, process your grief, man. That's important.
Yeah, that is hard. I am more processing anger than anything else, and it's definitely inside of a context of being post very religious, like evangelical tongue talking, church planting leader. You know, that world, working in Christian radio for 18 years, which is why I have an affinity with Seth Andrews, because Andrews and I are contemporaries. We were in Christian radio at the same time, so I actually remember him from there.
Nice.
So,
Nice.
but here I am now, years later, going, "Wow, okay, it's really kind of complex." But anyway, that was part. I really appreciate you saying that, Eric, because I think for me the biggest issue is realizing that I have the feelings that I have, and I have to process them the way that I need to process them, and unfortunately, it sometimes is not healthy. And I'm noticing that it's like it ends up being a situation where it is not good for my mother, who processes more from an emotional perspective, and I'm coming from a little more of logic, reason, and cognitive, issues. So anyway, I don't know. I guess just that chat in there with you guys, I could not wait to have an opportunity to actually talk out loud and say out loud that I'm in the process of deconverting. That in and of itself is huge.
That is huge. And it is difficult to be going through that at the same time that you're forced in a very real and, tragic way to deal with the reality of it, right? It's one thing to be all philosophical and be like, oh, well, in this theory, this is reality versus this. But when it comes
Let's
home,
talk about free will.
right? When it becomes a thing that you are having to deal with their families having to deal with, that does add a layer to it that makes it ups the stakes a little bit. It makes it, you're playing on a harder level here than a lot of us have. And that's commendable. And the fact that you are pursuing this and being honest with your own thoughts, your own rationality while you're dealing with something this hard is very commendable. So I would say, kind of echoing what Eric said, but kind of extending that to your mom, right? And saying, hey, this is how I'm grieving. And it's hard. And for her, if she finds comfort in this and is not actively trying to harm you because I found that a lot of the time when I'm grieving, I've had to grieve alongside religious relatives. And there is a shared experience there, but that gets a little bit tenuous when they try and pull you into their version of grieving. So as long as you are able to hold that boundary with your mom, giving her that grace, giving her the space to deal with this as she needs to, and being there for her is going to be paramount here. So take your time. Wow. This is not a race. There is no end goal. This isn't a resolution where you're like, by May 2021, I'm going to have completely purged all of my past experience with, that's not realistic, and nobody's expecting that of you. So
I actually really like that.
Yeah.
That reminds me of when I used to run after school programs. I tell kids, hey, there's a time and a place for everything, and just be aware, have some tact. And as a non-believer, I'm sure that you would recognize that it would be rather tactless for somebody to use that as an excuse. Hold on, I was going to read that. For someone to use that as an excuse to try and convert you. So be the example. Show that tact.
That was actually part of the challenge with the funeral itself. Yeah. Going back, and also during a COVID crisis where he was a very, very well-known person in Louisiana, and so. But being that better person, it feels good, and it I highly recommend it. Be the better person. Thank you.
And one other thing.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, Matthew Sutherland in the chat actually typed something in that I wanted to share. And it was a response to you talking about your mom hearing the dog bark. It says, "It's nice that the dog bark made you think of Eric. It gave us both a chance to remember him. Thanks for sharing, Mom."
Oh.
You know, as
Wow.
kind of an,
And
right?
I go in a whole different, because I go from being kind of hooked, and that actually is very helpful. Thank you, Matthew.
Yeah, we got an amazing audience. We really do.
We really do. And if you're interested in listening to this back and watching the live chat, we've got lots of love for you in the chat, lots of people empathizing with you, and it's a really great community. So
Absolutely.
as you continue to hopefully come to more C'est La Vie episodes and dive into that community, there's a lot of overlap. And the Talk Heathen community is here for you as well on Discord, on Facebook, and in these chats.
Definitely. And for anybody who's watching, thank you. Take care, man.
Up next is probably the best thing you will find on the internet. And if you think I'm exaggerating, you've obviously not heard it. You Are Not So Smart started life as a blog by journalist David McCraney. It then became a book and a podcast. Here's a description from youarenotsosmart.com about how the blog came about. One week I saw both the Devon Brown person swap and the Invisible Gorilla videos on YouTube, and they blew my mind. Also, at that time, I was marathoning Penn and Teller's bullshit on DVD. I felt like there was a common thread in all of that, something about how biased perception and lazy reasoning goes unnoticed because we are all so unwittingly overconfident. It reminded me of the experiments that seemed to stir up the most conversation in class when I was taking lots of college psychology courses, and it all just clicked. That would make a cool blog. The format of the show sees McCraney interviewing someone from the field of psychology or neurology talking about their research, or about fallacies, or David McCraney himself relaying a study related to the subject of the show from the past. All this followed by cookies. And if you don't find yourself singing along to the intro of the cookie section, then in my opinion, you need to give yourself a shake and have some fun. Here's a clip from the show. Please visit David's website where you can support him on Patreon, find merchandise and buy one of his books, You Are Not So Smart and You Are Now Less Dumb. The link is in the description below.
Our guest on this episode of the You Are Not So Smart podcast is Dr. Julia Shaw, a psychologist who has been on the podcast several times and someone who I consider a true friend. And she is the author of Evil and The Memory Illusion, the latter of which we haven't really gotten into on the show, not the book itself, nor the research she did that led to that book. And I wanted to bring her back on the show because we've never talked about the book. Let's talk about the book. But also last month, she had another study published. Yes, in the middle of the lockdown, while we're all sheltering at home, Julia Shaw published another research paper. But before you shake your fists at her ridiculous productivity, that paper was written and researched a while back and just now made it through the vetting pipeline of science. And it harkens back to her original focus as a researcher, memory. You see, Julia is famous among psychologists because she was able to implant false memories into a group of subjects and convince 70% of them that they were guilty of a crime they did not commit. And she did so by using the sort of sloppy interrogation techniques that some police departments have been truly guilty of using in the past. In other words, she showed that unbeknownst to the interviewer and the interviewee, asking a certain series of questions in a certain order is all it takes to alter a person's memory, and in some cases, that leads people to a conviction, a wrongful criminal conviction that they themselves wrongfully believe they deserve. We're going to talk about that, the extension of that research, memory itself, and a little bit about how all this ties into how our brains are making sense of this strange moment in which we're all living. I'm referring, of course, to the coronavirus. I'm sure you're very tired of hearing people say this strange moment or these unprecedented times, but they are. And on that note, Julia is actually crazy productive right now, so you can shake your fist at her if you want, because she just had an article published in The Guardian about why April seemed so long and March seemed to fly right by. We're going to talk about that too. Also, Julia recorded her side of this from inside a blanket fort. And we mention it a couple times, and I'm mentioning it to you because I just don't want you to be confused when we bring it up. But it was very fun, and it was a good conversation, and I think you will enjoy this. And here it is, a conversation with Dr. Julia Shaw about memory.
I'm Dr. Julia Shaw, and I'm a psychological scientist at University College London, and I write books, and I do quite a lot of science communication.
Yes, you do quite a lot, and I recommend everyone check out your Instagram, which is always very entertaining and very well curated.
Very sci-fi.
Very sci-fi. Getting
very
more
book
sci-fi.
And sci-fi. It is getting more sci-fi. It's getting more artsy and more sci-fi as my own brain develops. You get to watch me, and my passions develop over time.
Actually, thank you very much. You introduced me to the retro sci-fi Instagram accounts. There's like 6 of them, and they're my favorite thing. Every morning, I'm like, oh, what? Great. 70s and 80s sci-fi art. Like you think you know what you're getting into if you've seen Boris Vallejo, but it goes so much weirder and so much deeper than that. I love it. Thank you very much.
Anytime. I've started creating cyanotype art, which is when you use sort of photosensitive chemicals, and then you process things outside. So you sort of layer on images, and I'm using actually retro sci-fi covers, and I'm processing them, and then I'm layering them on with NASA images onto cyanotype paint. And so stay tuned for some creative creations based on that.
Wow. Okay. Jeez. I will never catch up to your productivity, or to your just overall weirdness, especially.
So weird.
Yeah, because
So
as
science.
a scientist, yes, as a mad scientist, you've done something really strange. Let me just go right to it. In the book you write, and I'm quoting you, "I'm a memory hacker. I get people to believe things that never happened." You wrote that and put it in a book and put it out into the world, and it's on bookshelves, and you can get it in a book called The Memory Illusion. What are you talking about, and what made you want to do that kind of stuff?
So what I'm talking about is actually the topic of my PhD research, which involved implanting false memories of committing crime into people who had no criminal history. And so the purpose of it was to basically investigate the intersection of false memories, so memories of things that never happened, and false confessions, so when people falsely confess to crimes they didn't commit. And I wanted to do them both at the same time, basically, and convince people of this criminal past they didn't actually have.
Yeah, but why?
But why? Because I think reality is something that has fascinated me for a long time. So I've got some people in my family who have a strange relationship with reality. And so it became clear from a very young age that everyone's reality is different. And some people's reality is dramatically different, with things like mental health issues and things like that. So they're literally seeing and hearing things that you don't. Paranoid delusions and schizophrenia and those kinds of things. You just realize when someone is talking that they are perceiving a very different reality. Now, on a less mental health-ish sort of level, we also find that every individual just has their own reality. And that to me is fascinating. And it ties in with memory, and it ties in with identity, because I think our identity is based on who we think we have been in the past. And that is your memory, especially your autobiographical memory. And so being able to hack it or change it showcases this possibility of distorting reality on a very fundamental level.
Yeah, I remember in Total Recall, just to go ahead and get really layperson on you, I remember there's a line in Total Recall, which Total Recall is all about implanting memories, because it's, it comes from a Philip K. Dick story. Since you're a sci-fi nerd, I'm trying to ingratiate myself to your graces. There's a line there like somebody tells the main character, Arnold Schwarzenegger, that he's it doesn't matter if he doesn't have any of his old memories. That's not who he is as a person. You are not your memories. What would you say to that sort of statement, Julia Shaw?
Well, you are your memories. And in fact, in Total Recall, that's the whole point, is that you're changing memories, and that's changing who the person thinks they are and how they're dealing with reality. So, I mean, there's a number of movies that deal with this, including Blade Runner, where it's a question of sort of, can you copy memories? Can you implant memories and give people a perceived childhood maybe that wasn't quite the way that they remember it, or didn't happen at all, potentially? Yeah. If we're talking about, robots, can you give a robot a history by just giving them fake memories? And if so, what should those memories look like? What makes them feel real? And to me, that's a fundamental question as well, is that it's one thing to get people to believe untruths or believe sort of fake news, if you will, sort of facts, individual pieces of information that are factually inaccurate. That is incredibly easy, which we all have so many misconceptions. And so, I mean, you write about this all the time.
Yeah.
We are, in fact, not as smart as we think we are, and we are getting things wrong all the time. And, but more than that is when it's multisensory, when, you know, you can feel things and touch things, and this memory you think you have has multiple dimensions. And that's also what Blade Runner goes into. Sort of, what does it take to make that feeling? And so there they have sort of the memory maker who creates these false memories.
I love it so much. I love that movie. I had Movie Pass when that came out. Do you remember? I don't know. Do you ever have Movie Pass there? The Movie Pass was this like for $10 a month, you could watch as many movies as you wanted. You just like came in with a little card. It failed immediately, but I had it when it was still going. And I remember when Blade Runner 2049 came out, I saw the movie 3 times in the theater with that Movie Pass, and that was the best use of that thing. And yes, I very much remember the memory creator and the whole premise of he had formed a mission in life by assuming he was this person in childhood that turned out to not to be true at all. And so the whole question of that movie is similar to Total Recall, which is a whole Philip K. Dick thing, which is your thing, which is
what is real? What is real and who am I?
What is real? Who am I? My core personality interacts with, if we, you know, there's a model of human cognition that assumes that personality is one thing and memory is another, and they interact to create our being. And if you take away the memory, then that personality will still interact with something. And so those movies sort of play with that. I know Blade Runner plays with that a lot. Like his core personality was a good human being in some form or another, a heroic character so it didn't matter in the end if it was true or not. What do you think about that?
I mean, this is a question that also comes up with Alzheimer's patients or people with severe dementia as it sort of progresses. And so you see memories fading, and people will say, you know, my parent is no longer the person they used to be. And, you know, we hear that picked up quite a lot in lay language when we talk about sort of losing our autobiographical memories. And I think that it is probably more fundamental, the connection between memory and personality, than we might like. And that shifting our memories does have a more profound influence on our personality than we assume. And on top of that,
I didn't want you to say that.
See, we don't like it. And I also think that this ties in with another misconception we have, which is that we assume that personality is stable. And that's partly something that psychologists themselves, I think, believe, or many have believed, because there has been research on this. There's been, you know, a shift over time in assuming that personality is stable, and then now assuming it's a bit more dynamic again. But I think personality in general, we assume we're always going to be the person we are today. That just isn't the case.
Even though we weren't that person 10 years ago.
Exactly. But even that, it's impossible to look back at 10 years ago and see it without looking through the lens of today. And so even there, you're probably adjusting and adapting your story of 10 years ago to fit your narrative today. And that in and of itself is potentially creating a fictional or false memory narrative in your own life. So you can give yourself false memories quite easily.
Sticking with the science theme, we're going to an amazingly informative show hosted by an astrophysicist from the University of Oxford. Her website says, Dr. Becky Smethurst is an astrophysicist at the University of Oxford and star of astronomy-themed YouTube channel Dr. Becky. Her current research is trying to answer the question, how do galaxies and black holes evolve together? Her YouTube channel, Dr. Becky, where each week she explains either an unsolved mystery, a weird object found in space, or general space news, with an unnatural level of enthusiasm, has over 100,000 subscribers and counting. Her debut public science book, Space, 10 Things You Should Know, was named one of Sky at Night magazine's top 20 books of 2019. Whether you want to know how the speed of light was measured, see a day in the life of an Oxford University astrophysicist, or why we bother studying space at all, this is the perfect place to go. Enjoy this clip from Dr. Becky, and please pop over to her channel to give her a like. You can also get her book, Space, 10 Things You Should Know, or the American version, Space at the Speed of Light, by visiting her website and following the links.
Why do we even bother funding research into black holes and dark matter and how big the universe is if that doesn't have any direct benefit to society? You know, especially when we could be funding medical research or research into newer and better technologies that will improve all our lives. Essentially, sort of like, what have astronomers ever done for us?
What have the Romans ever done for us?
But the thing is, astrophysics research does benefit society, just in ways you might not have guessed. It's very indirect, and it does take a couple of decades to trickle down to benefit things like medicine and new technologies and even the phone in your pocket. So let's dive into this. What has astronomy ever done for us? So let's start with the most basic of those questions, right? Like, why we even bother doing astrophysics research? Why do I bother, dedicating my life to doing my research on supermassive black holes? And for me, it's just for curiosity's sake, right? I think humans are naturally curious. It's what made us ask, what's at the top of that mountain or what's over that ocean? And it's the same drive that makes us ask, how do black holes grow in my case? Or how many other planets are there in the universe that can hold life like ours? And are we alone in the universe? And how big is the universe? So satiating my curiosity about supermassive black holes is the reason that I do astrophysics, right? It's the reason why I publish my research in a journal as well, in the hope of satiating others' curiosities on the topic. And also it's why I do science communication, right, too, because I want to satiate your curiosity on all that's going on in research at the minute. But that's not enough for everyone. It's definitely not enough for your funding applications either. So the reason we fund astrophysics research is really for all of the unforeseen benefits that come out of it. The advancements in technology or the inventions that come from asking these big astrophysics or cosmological questions. There's many examples of this. I've just picked out 3 to highlight today that have come direct from astrophysics research and are now benefiting society. First up is Wi-Fi. So if you are watching this video right now using your Wi-Fi, you've got astronomers to thank for it. And that is because sending signals wirelessly inside homes and buildings is actually really difficult. And that's because these signals bounce off everything, walls, objects, and just scatter all over the place. It weakens your signal and the speed of your Wi-Fi reduces. So when Wi-Fi was first developed, it was never really used because, well, the speed was so slow. What you need, obviously, is a way of recombining all of those scattered signals so you increase the signal strength that you receive wirelessly and therefore speed up your Wi-Fi. Who figured all that out? Radio astronomers. So radio astronomy really suffered in its early days, sort of after World War II, because they just really couldn't get the same level of detail as an optical telescope with a radio telescope. And that's because of something called angular resolution. Essentially, when you talk about the angular resolution of a telescope, you're talking about what's the smallest thing they can see on the sky in terms of like its angular size. So if you imagine the sky is 360 degrees round, the moon, half a degree across, right? So if you're trying to look at a star, it's even smaller of a fraction of a degree. If you're trying to look at something even further away, it's what we start getting down to what we call arc minutes and arc seconds. So an arc minute is a 60th of a degree, an arc second is a 60th of an arc minute. They're all angles, but they're incredibly small. And that angle, in terms of like how small of that thing you can see, is dependent on the wavelength of light you're using divided by the diameter of your telescope. So something like an optical telescope, which has, 600 nanometer wavelength and about a 2 meter wide telescope, you're still going to be able to see something pretty small. But if you up that wavelength into the radio waves of around meters or so, then you're not going to be able to see anywhere near the same level of detail. So if you want to achieve the same level of detail with a radio telescope, you also need to massively increase the size of your telescope as well, which is why we've seen over the years bigger and bigger telescopes built all the time, from the Lovell telescope at Jodrell Bank to the Arecibo Observatory to FAST in China. You have these huge dishes, but eventually you kind of reach the limits of what engineering can actually build in a single telescope that can collect as much light as possible. So radio astronomers developed a new technique that allowed them to combine lots of little telescopes together to make a much larger one that was either kilometers across or even more recently the size of the Earth itself. What did they need to be able to do that though? They needed a way to combine all those different signals from the different telescopes coherently together. And it's exactly the same method that's used to boost your Wi-Fi signal in your house after it scatters off all the different objects on its way to you. Not only that, but it's the same process that's used to reconstruct an image of your body after an MRI scan. An MRI scan detects radio waves that are coming from individual water molecules in your body that are vibrating, and so it needs a way to recombine all the signals from the individual water molecules together to give you this coherent picture. All of that from radio astronomers just wanting to be able to see things in a little bit more detail. Next up, charged coupled devices, aka the very first digital cameras. So astronomy and astrophysics really are observational sciences, right? We're all about images and image processing. And so because that's so central to the science, the way we take those observations has massively changed over the centuries, you know, from a simple hand-drawn sketch to using a very sort of big, bulky photographic plate that had to be exposed and then developed, you know, sort of in the same way that camera film used to be. But it means that, you know, because we are science, you want to do that in the most precise and accurate way that you can. Now, one of the main things you want to measure in astronomy and astrophysics is the brightness of an object. But that's really hard to do on a piece of film or a photographic plate, right? When all you can do is really compare how bright one object is with another. You don't get some accurate measurement of, say, this is the number of particles of light that hit this specific part of your image, like you would in, say, a digital sensor of some form. And so it was astronomers that really pushed for that technology to be developed, a digital detector that would record on each part of the image how much light hit that area. That invention finally came in 1969 from physicists at Bell Laboratories, including George Smith and Willard Boyle, and eventually then that trickled back down to astronomers as well. Astronomers were the first to use this new invention. They were put on telescopes, very famously chosen by the Hubble Space Telescope development team back late 70s, early 80s as well to be used. And then the technology has evolved from there, changed a little bit. It's got the detectors a lot smaller as well, until now the time that we use them, you know, every single day, either on a camera or on our phones as well. I mean, I guess you could say that we have astronomers to thank for selfies. And finally, number 3, image analysis techniques. It probably comes as no surprise to anyone after hearing before that, you know, that astronomy and astrophysics are the science of imaging, to hear that they have pushed forward developments and improvements to the way that we analyze and process images. Because essentially what we do when we get an image from a telescope, that is a raw image. It has, you know, the thing that we care about, the object, whether it's a star or a galaxy or whatever, in it, but it also has many other sources of noise in that, whether that's scattered light around Earth's atmosphere or whether it's actually noise from the detector itself. All those sources of noise need to be accounted for and removed by processing the image to essentially clear it up somewhat. How do you do that? Well, you need the tools and the programs and the programming languages that can deal with image data, things like IDL and IRAF that were all developed by astronomers and astrophysicists, which over the years have seen improvements in the algorithms and routines that are available to help remove these sources of noise and clear up images. It's now the exact same languages and techniques and routines that are used across many different industries, but also medicine. Again, every time you go for a scan, your doctor maybe does a CT scan or an MRI scan, they're going to take that raw image from the scanner and then remove all the sources of noise, clear it up so they can see what they care about, the thing that they're trying to look at in your body and diagnose and test.
All right, but apart from the sanitation, the medicine, education, wine, public order, irrigation, roads, a fresh water system and public health, what have the Romans ever done for us?
So that's just 3 things that have come off the back of funding astronomy and astrophysics research over the decades. You know, from asking questions like, how big is that black hole? Or what's the most distant galaxy? We've seen so many benefits to our lives, you know, every day. Sure, it's taken a fair few years for those benefits to trickle through, but they are there. If you want to know more, I've linked a great article from the International Astronomical Union, which lists even more ways astronomy has benefited society, including computing, timing things, and also communications as well. So one thing that I like to speculate on, which I think is fun, is to think about what's going on in astrophysics research now that we're sort of pushing for technology to be advanced sort of in that area that will then eventually trickle down into, you know, industry and society in, say, 10 or 20 years time. And I was thinking about something my office mate said to me last year. So she's a radio astronomer again. She works on LOFAR, which is one of these huge radio telescope arrays across much of Northern Europe. And she said the telescope is actually taking data and storing it locally faster than they can actually transfer that data from the local storage to their laptops or their supercomputers to actually do the astrophysical analysis on it. And I was thinking about how much of our society is actually reliant on data transfer. It's kind of scary if you stop to think about it, but it does. If we're pushing for faster transfer speeds for this strange reason to do with astronomy, it could trickle down to that infrastructure in the next 20 years and improve, you know, the speeds of information transfer and data transfer, whether that's communications or perhaps bank transfers or whatever it might be. And it just really makes you stop and think that all of that could come from this one telescope. This one telescope that on paper, when it was designed, had no obvious immediate impact or benefit to society in any way, shape or form, but could have these huge ripple effects down the line. The reason it was built is just because we as humans were curious enough to build a telescope that works using the exact same method that Wi-Fi uses to bring all your signals back together in order to answer a big astrophysical question of when did the first stars form?
Oh, peace! Shut up!
Ethan Michael, without a shadow of a doubt, in my mind, is the hardest working YouTube content creator out there. I came across him somewhat by accident, largely due to a mutual friend bombarding Facebook with his videos, and another person on this list who I've yet to talk about, appearing on quite a few of his shows. As soon as I started watching, I was hooked, and I had a lot of catching up to do. So much so that I'm still catching up now. Ethan produces a number of different shows, from call-in to debates to roundtables, and I'm not going to lie, choosing what to show here has been a difficult decision because there is simply so much content to go at, and it is all so good. Please enjoy this short clip and go and check out Ethan's channel for some of the most amazing content you will find on YouTube.
Well, I believe from my perspective that I've had many, but I was asked to keep it to a specific experience.
Yeah, that'd be great if you could tell us about your alien experience.
All right. For context, I'd been having experiences up to this. This happened in end of 2008, beginning of 2009. My experiences have been happening my whole life. They're not like a one and done type of an issue. But at this point in my life, I was in the middle of moving from Tennessee to Ohio. And I was staying in an apartment when I was in Tennessee with my wife. And I went to bed one evening and she had fallen asleep already on the couch. So I just went to bed and laid down. And some point in the night, I was awoken by what I would describe, what I later came to find would be described as like a hybrid female, which is like a cross between us and them. And she had an oversized cranium. She had long blonde hair. She had large eyes, but they were human colored eyes, like blue eyes, and too small of a mouth and too small of a nose to be human. And the room was filled with kind of a neon pink light. The next thing I remember is being in a round room that was brightly lit and seemed very sequenced and shiny, almost like you were inside a brightly lit club in the 80s or something.
Ooh, that
And there
sounds
was
exciting.
like pink fog rolling across the floor. This seemed very strange, very almost dreamlike. And it would be a peaceful scene were it not for this hybrid female who is still standing to my right and staring at me. And I have kind of, I get this suggestion in my mind to follow her, and I kind of uncontrollably follow her into another room.
I've
When
had
I
that urge in clubs too.
Huh?
I said I've had the urge to follow strange women through dance clubs as well. I'm just joking around, man.
Yeah,
Because you said it looked like a club.
I do not want to follow this one. Because when I got into the next room, I was in what appeared to be, from my perspective, a large industrial scale butcher shop, or like
That took a turn.
industrial meat packing plant. There were meat hooks and conveyor belts, and there were other entities in this room, what appeared to be other male hybrids, and at least one tall mantis creature, or mantis being. Some people call them insectoids. Basically, I was in this part of my life. I had made a lot of bad choices. Most of my life, these alien creatures have been telling me I'm, either going to mess up hard or do well.
May I ask
a
you
good
question,
side trying to convince me to do well, and a bad side trying to do me harm.
May I
Well,
ask
I
you a
have
question?
been in this
Nathan?
situation. Yes, go ahead.
When you had this experience, were you by chance on any like hallucinogens or under the influence of any kind?
No, not at all.
Okay.
I have in the past done hallucinogens, but not at
Same.
this point.
But do you believe, just so I understand this correctly, do you think you were essentially visited by aliens, or you think you were like teleported onto a ship, or what specifically do you think happened?
I believe I was being shown the destruction of my eternal life body.
So are you, did you say you're a believer in God now?
I am, yes. Now, how that defines itself, I don't know. Like, I can't, I don't have all the answers and do not claim to. I just know what's happened in my life.
Hey, listen, I don't have all the answers, and I don't claim to, is probably the most intelligent thing that anybody's said so far on this show.
Yes.
What I am wondering is, at the risk of being redundant, repetitive, I would ask the same question that I asked the last caller. Like, how useful do you think personal experiences are for knowing what's real or what's true?
Well, I see your point that if I were making a claim that had never been made by somebody before, yes, it should definitely be taken into question. But if you can compare my claim to other claims that are similar, and there's enough overlap of detail, is that not some kind of proof? Is that not how you do convict a murderer? I mean, I can point you to cases of genuine, or I can point you to cases that have been studied that are similar enough to my own that I feel comfortable that, sometimes experience also opens one up to, like, people who are in war know what war is like, but people who aren't really don't.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And people who have been abducted, they can go to that. People who have had real experiences can go to the information about those things and weed out what is and isn't, BS and isn't.
Have you ever looked at
where people are trying to BS?
I don't think you're trying to BS. I'm on this show, Ethan does a really good job of making sure that.
Well, I have nothing to gain by BSing. It's not like abductees who claim they've been abducted make a hell of a lot of money, unless you're Whitley Strieber, and he's really not making money right now either.
So this is interesting. I grew up in San Diego, and you're reminding me of a thing that happened when I was a kid. There was this comet. It was called like the Haley or Hale-Bopp comet, and there were Hale-Bopp, yeah, right. And there was this group of people who were in a really wealthy neighborhood, and they all believed they were part of a religious group, where the leader was telling them that there was like some sort of vessel or ship coming behind the comet, and that it was like it was obscured by the comet.
On Coast to Coast that year.
Yeah. So, do you remember what happened with this group? It was called the Heaven's Gate group.
I do. I was a kid then too. I was born in '84.
Same. So, yeah, for those who might not know, this group of people, it was a very large group of people. They all committed suicide together because they were convinced by the leader of the group that that's what they had to do to catch the spaceship. And they all believed so sincerely in the message that this guy was telling them that they were willing to literally die because they were so convinced. They had had all these personal experiences with the leader of the group telling them things, and they believed that they were being told the truth. I'm not convinced that they caught the spaceship. Even though they were.
I mean, but there's a difference between willy-nilly believing anything that you hear about the things, especially from a show that might be entertainment, or from somebody that is trying to run a cult. I'm certainly not trying to run a cult.
Oh, yeah, no. Don't.
No. I mean, I don't think that people running cults necessarily are like sinister. I think sometimes they may sincerely believe things. I just what I'm trying to point back to is just this question of like, how do we evaluate claims? Because everybody's got personal experiences, but it seems to me that it's fairly obvious when we think about it that not everyone's experiences are consistent with what's real or what's true.
The experiences I have had have caused me genuine emotional issues. And the experiences I've had have caused me definite issues with, my brain it's like I've seen things beyond my own capacity. My brain is constantly trying to understand it. That makes sense. It's like the human brain is capable of following 5 plot lines at a time. You start adding 6 or 7 into the mix, yeah, you're really thrown off. Now, I'm the kind of person, long book that has a lot of character development and goes in different directions. But the things that have happened in my life, it's not any one experience that convinces me that it's so. It's the overarching consistency of those experiences over time that are giving me personal confirmation that they're true. And because I can place them in context and time in my own life. Not to mention, I think they wanted me to remember things.
I want to address, I don't usually look at the live chat, but there was a comment that was made that I do want to address because I want to sort of validate what you're saying, Nathan. The comment was that your experience didn't happen if you don't have proof. No proof didn't happen. And I think this is a mistake. And I want to explain why. So there's this great movie, A Beautiful Mind, that's about this mathematician, John Nash, and he was a schizophrenic, and in addition to being a Nobel laureate, right? And he had these experiences of seeing people and having very vivid hallucinations. And his subjective experience was that there were these people that he could communicate with, that he had relationships with. To everybody else in the room, those figures that are only existed in Nash's mind did not exist. So if we were to say John Nash saw people that weren't there, now we're in sketchy territory. But if we say that John Nash had the subjective experience of seeing these people and talking to these, even if they only existed in his mind, his experience was real, even if those people were not present in reality and nobody else could interact with them. That changes nothing about what Nash experienced. The question was whether Nash's experiences And his interpretation of those experiences, his judgments about those experiences, was actually consistent with what was happening in the real world, or if it was just happening in his head because he was a schizophrenic. It's a dangerous move to just say, you know, someone's experience didn't happen and to dismiss them in this way.
I definitely am familiar with the story. I guess to that I would say, yeah, I don't have any proof other than my recall, which I guess is not proof to anybody really. But
well,
I can say I've never been under hypnosis, and that's not how they came to be.
Okay.
You know, I can say that the confirmation I have is when something they've shown me plays out in real time. You know, and it's all personal. But it's incredibly undeniable from my perspective.
I know we got to move on to other callers, and I don't want to cut you off, Nathan. I would encourage you, just especially because of what you said about how your experiences have had this emotional impact on you, to, you know, maybe just for your own benefit, check out some of the resources and books that are out there, some of the lectures that are out there about skepticism, about the idea of withholding belief until you have sufficient evidence to justify a claim. The place that I started that really just like blew the doors off in my mind was reading Carl Sagan's book, The Demon Haunted World. It was a great resource to me. I basically recommend it to everybody. I wish it was like mandatory reading for like 6th graders. I think it would be awesome. Yeah, I hope we get a chance to talk again.
Yeah, Nathan, I want to thank you for taking the time to call in, share your experience, and most importantly, staying friendly and not thinking that questions are a personal attack. So thank you.
Well, I just hope you do hear me out again if I call.
Absolutely.
Hell yeah, man.
I hope you felt that we heard you out today. Or I hope you felt that we listened to everything you had to say.
Well, I would just hope that over time we develop a communication, and maybe you can hear from me from time to time.
Sure.
And see what you think about what I have to say.
Definitely. I would love to talk to you again, Nathan. I'll follow up with you later today. And thanks for taking the time to call in.
All right. Thank you.
Talking of Ethan Michael, one of the reasons his channel came to my attention was because I saw this man on it. And the way I came across Kenneth Leonard has a strange story behind it too. I'm a member of a philosophy group on Facebook, and in that group I'd been having a bit of a back and forth with a guy for a couple of years. All very friendly, although almost completely opposing when it came to our viewpoints. As you might imagine, having been talking to him for 2 years, I was by no means the only interlocutor this guy had. And over that period, I had seen people come and go when it came to debating this person. So, one day along comes a new face to the conversation, and I was blown away. He was pretty much arguing in exactly the same way that I did. And he kept doing it. He kept coming to my attention, making these arguments that I couldn't help but appreciate. And then I found out that he had a YouTube channel. Kenneth's YouTube channel description describes him as promoting skepticism, reason, and critical thinking, trying every day to be less wrong and less likely to be wrong, working hard to avoid fallacies as much as possible, and hopefully providing some value to curious people and elevating the levels of the conversation we're all having here on YouTube. The channel is only a few months old, yet in that time Kenneth has managed to have some amazing guests, and Kenneth's natural, friendly manner really brings out the spirit of a conversation that draws you in and makes you sit there in eager anticipation for the next episode. Please go and check him out, but only after you've watched this clip.
I've been thinking about how do we evaluate claims, because there are a lot of claims out there. And the question, how do you determine if a claim should be believed, is a big one. There are a lot of reasons that people offer in support of the idea that a claim should be believed. You know, maybe a belief unifies people. Maybe a belief makes someone feel good. The reasons tend to boil down to maybe a belief is useful. I've heard many people use the utility of a belief to argue that one should believe something, But the utility of a belief has nothing to do with whether a belief is true. So what do we do if someone really cares about whether or not their beliefs are true? In other words, what if someone cares about whether their beliefs are actually consistent with reality? What if somebody even takes it a step further and wants to believe as many true things and as few false things as possible? Increasingly, when I talk to people about their beliefs, I like to begin by asking them if they care about whether their beliefs are true. Just point blank. They don't like this most of the time. People find the question a little bit offensive because, people tend to say yes, almost reflexively when asked the question. It's just assumed by most people that they care about whether their beliefs are true. And most of the time, I think they probably do. It's really obvious when it comes to most of our beliefs that believing false things has consequences. I don't think people go around thinking that they want to be deceived. It's so obvious that we barely think about it most of the time, that our beliefs are unconsciously the byproducts of skepticism. When you get up and decide to leave a room, you don't stop to really think about whether or not you should, try to flow through the wall like a ghost or take the door. There's a lot of evidence out there in support of the use of doors. You've witnessed this and you've done this calculation in your head without thinking about this, so you're gonna go out the door. It's a skeptical thing to do. But what is skepticism? There's so much misconception out there about what it even is. If you look it up, it doesn't help. You get like 6 different definitions. Are we talking about religious skepticism or scientific skepticism? Is skepticism a thing? Is it a tool? There's a lot of there's so many usages out there that you can get lost in the sauce. In simplest terms, skepticism is just it's doubt. It's tentative incredulity. It's the refusal to accept claims as being true until those claims have been demonstrated to actually be true. In his book, The Demon Haunted World, which is about skepticism and the scientific method, Carl Sagan wrote that what skeptical thinking boils down to is the means to construct and to understand a reasoned argument, and especially important to recognize a fallacious or fraudulent argument. And he continues with, the question is not whether we like the conclusion that emerges out of a train of reasoning, but whether the conclusion follows from the premises or a starting point, and whether that premise is true. Notice the emphasis on the value judgment there, that he values truth. And notice that he said the means. Skepticism is a process. It's the application of critical thinking. The conclusion follows after the process. This is a good point to pause and to focus for a moment on what skepticism isn't. The whole inspiration for me doing this video was a series of conversations that I've had with someone I know who accepts a number of spurious claims as true. With a number of claims this person has made in a number of different conversations, he's made a claim of his own about me. He'll tell me, you just don't want to believe fill in the blank, X is true. And if it were true that my default position was that X is not true, I wouldn't be a skeptic. I want to make that very clear. There's a serious, meaningful, critical distinction between saying X is false, which is a claim in itself that would need to be demonstrated before it should be believed, and saying I'm not prepared to believe X is true until the person claiming X is true can demonstrate that X is true. Atheists like me run into this problem like all the time. All the time. If someone tells me that they worship a god, and it doesn't matter which god or which religious tradition it is, and I'm just not convinced that the God that they worship is real, I don't find whatever argument they're making or evidence compelling, that's different from me saying your God is not real. My all-time favorite illustration of this distinction I first heard from Matt Dillahunty, who uses a jar of gumballs or jelly beans. It doesn't matter what's in the jar. I've used a bag of peanut M&Ms to make the point. Anyway, there's a jar, okay? And it's filled with an unknown quantity of jelly beans, okay? So any belief regarding about whether or not there's an odd or an even number of jelly beans should be withheld. It should be suspended in the absence of any evidence. So if somebody was to come along and say there's an even number of gumballs or jelly beans, I don't remember which I was using, I think jelly beans in there, but they haven't demonstrated how they know this is the case, the skeptical thing to do, the skeptic's position, is to withhold belief in the proposition there's an even number of jelly beans in there. Notice that this does not mean that the skeptic believes there's an odd number of jelly beans in there. They're just waiting until there's evidence before taking a position on whether there is, in fact, in reality, an even or odd number of jelly beans in the jar. People get really confused by this. I can't tell you how many times I've heard someone ask me something like, where does the universe come from? And when I say, I don't know where the universe came from, I don't know, they say, oh, so you're saying the universe came from nothing? No. I'm saying I don't know how many jelly beans are in the jar. I'm not going to take a position on something until I have enough evidence to support my belief, because I care about whether or not my belief is true. Think about how much trouble we could avoid as a species if more people would just stop and admit that they don't know what the hell they're talking about most of the time, and that they need to just withhold belief. That's it. Just withhold belief in the claims until they have evidence. Think about all the claims out there. Really consequential claims. Vaccines are dangerous. Joe Biden stole the election. There are only two genders. A woman's place is in the home. Psychology is bogus, and to be mentally healthy, what you really need to do is to go and be cleansed of thetans. Climate change is a hoax. You can go on and on and on, and I've heard people tell me all of these things. Public policy here in the United States, public policy everywhere is shaped in part by people who believe these types of claims. But how do we know if any of these claims are true? I think it matters. Usually when I hear claims like this, they're prefaced by, I believe. Like, I believe God thinks a marriage is only valid if it's between one man and one woman. That kind of thing. But the degree to which you believe something or are convinced that a claim is true has nothing to do with whether the belief or the claim is true. This should be obvious if you think about it, even for a moment. Because for every claim that you believe, someone out there is just as convinced that the opposite is true. So how do we figure out what is true when two people they're equally convinced of mutually exclusive claims? Well, we use the tools of skepticism. I also want to point out that in addition to skepticism not being cynicism, it isn't denialism either. It should go without saying, but the denial of belief in the face of conclusive evidence is not skepticism. For example, I find it frankly ridiculous that people refer to themselves as climate change skeptics when what they are more accurately are climate change deniers. Holding on to one's conclusion and defending it against evidence is completely backwards. It's antithetical to skepticism. Anytime that you start from your conclusion and then search for justification for your conclusion, rather than looking for the best evidence and then coming to a conclusion in light of where the evidence takes you, you are setting yourself up to be wrong. And for those of you out there who are watching this going, he didn't even bring up Descartes or Hume or any of the philosophers who've done work in this area, please calm down. Just calm down. There are plenty of videos out there for people who want to dig in and explore this space. I'm not here trying to create a book list for anybody or flex on anybody about, what philosophers I've read, okay? I'm just trying to clear up some misconceptions and encourage people to start asking themselves if their beliefs are supported by evidence. That's getting the foot in the door to skepticism. And to ask themselves how equipped they are to evaluate claims. Are the tools in your skeptical toolbox effective? Is your bullshit detector, what I was trying to say, is your bullshit detector calibrated? If not, you might be in trouble. If you want to believe as many few things and as few false things as possible, you're definitely in trouble. And you don't have to be particularly smart or well-read or educated or anything to be a skeptic. You just have to practice challenging your beliefs and valuing truth and evidence. When I look at the world, I see all these problems that are not only caused at their root by a lack of skepticism, but that persist because people lack the tools of skepticism that are necessary to solve the most serious problems that we face as a species. So, moving forward with this channel, I'm going to talk a lot about fallacies and other cognitive traps. There are so many ways to just consistently and reliably be wrong about a lot of things, for your beliefs to be disconnected or untethered from reality. And the project of being less wrong more of the time is ongoing. That's all I'm trying to do. And it's important to remember that nobody is perfectly rational. But the first step on the path to truth, I think, is just valuing truth consistently and asking a lot of questions. Hopefully better and better questions. And I hope you'll keep watching this channel, and hopefully we can all grow and learn how to ask better and better questions together and practice. So with that in mind, in the meantime, keep asking lots of questions, please. Thanks for watching.
At the beginning of the show, I told you that there were 2 special mentions that I was saving until the end. And this is why. This show is about the shows that inspired me to make the content that I do. And without these 2 people, I would probably not even have a show at all. I had been deliberating about starting my own content for about a year, and honestly didn't have the confidence. Would people be interested? Would they think I was arrogant? Would my take offer something new to the community? You can tell just by watching the first show just how nervous I was. I don't have an issue speaking in public, but to a camera? How could I do that? Well, I was fortunate enough that I came across 2 other people who had taken the plunge, and they were telling us that they were new, experimenting, not sure, and more importantly, they were good. They were both telling their stories in such an honest and engaging way that they just captured me. I took the plunge and emailed one of them, who didn't live so far away, with an idea I'd been toying with about a show. What if, I asked, we got together and made a show called Atheist Takeout, where we have a roundtable discussion about atheism while eating takeaway food? He was interested, and then lockdown hit, and the prospect of getting together was put on hold. That initially is what gave me the push. My 2 new friends were doing such a good job that I refined the name and tentatively outlined my focus for the show in the first episode. Without a doubt in my mind, if it hadn't been for Unapologetically.me and Yorkshire Atheist, I would still be sat twiddling my thumbs, asking myself, should I or shouldn't I? So if you have hate mail for me, send it to them. We're first going to dive into one of Richard's videos, then one of Laura's back to back. There will be a link below for both their YouTube channels and their Facebook pages. Please go and listen to their work. They are amazing and the reason that you are watching me at all.
Hi, I'm Richard, the Yorkshire Atheist. So I'm going to give 3 examples of something that I am going to talk about, 2 of which are sort of day-to-day examples, and one of them is sort of slightly on a more deeper emotional level, of things we shouldn't thank a god for. the God of Christianity or any other God. In my examples, I'll try and give sort of full explanations, but obviously nothing I can say here is exhaustive. But here we go with the first example. Don't thank God for the food you're eating. Instead, thank the farmers, the growers, the factory workers, the delivery drivers, the restaurant workers, the shopkeepers, the parents or partners who cook for us. And God isn't responsible for a good harvest or for supply lines working well. We understand meteorology and climate science. We understand the causes of changes in weather, changes in climate, things that we can affect as humans. We understand how to fertilise a field, how to generate fuel for transporting goods, how to make effective machinery to harvest crops. All these things are thanks to humans and human ingenuity, not a God. If God is responsible for providing you with food, isn't he also responsible for the endless number of people who die every year due to famine and starvation, failed crops, droughts? He provides food for you and for me, an atheist, just the same, but not for the people of like South Sudan, Somalia, Nigeria, Yemen, places like that, for example. Don't thank God. Thank humans for the food you're eating. Don't thank God for a safe journey. Thank the person who gave you the skills to drive as well as you can, or the skill of the drivers of other vehicles. Thank the driving instructors, the testers, for keeping up high standards of driving. Thank the years of experience and training of train drivers, bus drivers, tram drivers. The years of experience and training of people designing systems to reduce risk in various means of transport. The governments, past and present, local councils, for road safety laws, road safety rules. When the plane lands in stormy winds, thank the pilot who has been chosen by the airline to pilot that plane due to years of extensive training, practice, dedicated years of learning and experience to do that steadfastly and safely. A God isn't responsible for a safe trip, a safe journey. We understand how many variables go into the safety or otherwise of one person travelling somewhere from A to B. If you're thanking a God for a safe landing in a storm, isn't the God you're thanking also responsible for the storm in the first place? We understand ways to mitigate risk factors in a journey. There's a reason you wear a seatbelt. There's a reason you indicate when turning. There's a reason your car must have brake lights. There's a reason there are requirements of a certain amount of training and practice before someone can pilot an airline plane. Don't look at the news article about the woman who was in a car crash and was a centimetre away from dying and thank a God when simultaneously ignoring the thousands of people who actually die every year in similar incidents. Don't thank God. Thank humans for your safe journey. And lastly, and I think most importantly, don't thank God for getting you through hard times. Thank the friend who took your mind off things or for getting you that bag of food from the supermarket that you needed. Thank your family for giving you space when you needed it, or the hard words you needed to hear, or the chap you passed on the street who smiled at you just when you needed to see a smile on someone else's face. Thank your favourite band or composer for giving out their creativity to you, for their music, their work, their art, for you to enjoy, to help you process emotions, give you that extra headspace. Thank the doctors, the counsellors, the therapists whose expertise and medical support gave you tools and support to sort out thoughts and emotions in ways that you then can better deal with. And thank yourself. Thank yourself. Praying is a topic that I'm quite interested in. And I know lots of people feel encouraged, feel calmer, more motivated, feel emboldened after praying. Discussing with God, their personal friend and saviour, things that are going on in their lives that they're struggling with. Asking for help, for strength, for guidance, for serenity, for thankfulness, for any number of things. But the people asking for help know they need it and seek it practically. The people asking for strength know they feel weak and know they need to push themselves to be bolder. People asking for guidance know there's a difficult decision needed making and they're navigating this decision making themselves. People asking for serenity know this is what they need and seek out opportunities to enable and find this peace. People asking for thankfulness have it. They know there's something to be thankful about, and themselves can show gratitude and find ways to do this. Praying gives people the same reassurance and calm, in my opinion, as writing a diary or giving your friend a phone call to have a bit of a moan or talking to your counsellor or therapist. Not bottling things up is a positive way of dealing with things like that. Don't thank God for getting you through hard times. Thank professionals, thank friends, thank family, thank random acts of kindness. But most of all, thank yourself. Because it's you who got there, you who got through it. And you really ought to give yourself credit for that. Thanks for watching today. Please give a like, comment below if you found this interesting, useful, or boring and pointless. Whichever way, I'd be very happy to hear from you. I do respond to comments because obviously I've got like 40 subscribers, so there's not many people watching. But I'm very grateful for everyone who does watch, and certainly for those people who also subscribe. Yeah, so I'll see you in the next video. Much love, enjoy yourselves, and listen to what I said. Like, thank yourself, because you're doing well, you're doing great.
I am Laura, and today I'm just going to get straight to it. There are some bad claims out there, but sometimes they can sound really, really good, and it's difficult for the average person to determine a good argument from a bad one. The one thing that I've noticed that bothers me the most is when claims are presented as facts. So I'm going to go over a few of my favorite claims that are presented as evidence for a god, for a true fact, or a conclusion, when really they belong way, way back in step one, the claim. First, I need to go over some definitions so we can all be on the same page. A claim is an assertion of the truth of something, typically one that is disputed or in doubt. A hypothesis is a supposition or proposed explanation made on the basis of limited evidence as a starting point for further investigation. So the difference between a claim and a hypothesis is the level of evidence. Evidence, then, is the available body of facts or information indicating whether a belief or proposition is true or valid. So truth is in accordance with facts or reality, and a fact is a thing that is known or proved to be true. All of these terms can be very wishy-washy, and there's a lot of gray area in between, especially in regards to whether or not something can be considered evidence or whether or not something supports a claim or a hypothesis. When does something go from being a claim or a hypothesis to truth or fact? Okay, so armed with these definitions, I'm going to talk about a few of the claims that I hear the most often in everyday conversations. Just to be clear right up front, these are not elegant academic arguments. Arguments such as the Kalam cosmological argument, which is that the universe had a cause, or the teleological or watchmaker argument, will likely each be their own video, as there's a lot to unpack. You also just don't hear them as often in casual, everyday conversation, which is what I wanted to focus on in this video. These are just a few of the quick-to-address claims, not only about whether or not a God exists, but also details about said God and his will for us. So here's a quick list of just a few of the facts that come up in everyday conversation that kind of nig at the back of my head. 1. The world is wonderful because God made all that we see. 2. I am confident about my decision because God is guiding me. 3. We humans have morals because God is the arbiter of morality. 4. The Bible says that we are made in God's image. 5. People do bad things because we are naturally sinful and fall short of God's grace. 6. I know God answers prayers because he healed my cancer. 7. We are made stronger through God, or we are weak and require God to strengthen us. 8. God allows suffering because it is part of his plan. And the one I hear most commonly, any verse picked out of the Bible used to support or make a statement. Here are just a few quick examples for you. Okay, so there's a quick smattering for you. In each of these statements, something about the nature of God is presented as a fact. So in conversation, I tend to get caught up in arguing about the fact, creating counter arguments or refuting it. But what I've realized lately, and what bothers me, is that it isn't a fact. It's a claim. And going back to our definitions given at the beginning of the video, you can see that there's a pretty big difference. When someone says, I know there is a God because God answers prayers, here we have the presentation of an argument, the claim, there is a God, and the fact to support the claim, God answers prayers. The problem with this statement is that there are actually two claims. Claim 1, there is a God. Claim 2, God answers prayers. Because there is no evidence, it is not yet a hypothesis, and because we cannot test it, demonstrate it, show it, or falsify it, it is not yet a fact. There is nothing in reality that we can point to determine when a circumstance is an answered prayer and when it is just a circumstance. Now, I know. You could say all circumstances are answered prayers. But again, you're still making a claim based on no more than a really strongly held belief. Adding additional complexity to the scenario or adding on additional claims makes it sound more foolproof, but it is no more credible than before, perhaps even less so. So why am I pointing this out? Is it so that you can cut theists off in conversation and repeat petulantly, that's just a claim?
It's just a claim, it's just a claim, it's just a claim, it's just a claim.
Is it a surefire way to win the argument without having to raise any arguments of your own? No to both of those. I want to talk about it today because it was important for me to become aware of how to determine the difference between when someone is presenting a fact in a conversation and when they are simply making a claim. It is difficult and it takes time, but the more we can recognize what kind of a statement was made, the better able we'll be to respond. Oftentimes, statements like these can sound so reasonable, especially if you think that it could be possible for something like a prayer to be answered. It might even sound ridiculous, but you don't know how to respond because you know that you cannot prove that there is no God answering prayers. It is unfalsifiable, so it may feel like an argument that you can't win. I used to give credence to a lot of what people said. In other words, even as I disagreed with the statement, I approached it as though it had just as much validity as my position until I could either dismantle it or prove my position. I would have approached a statement like this with challenges like, well, how do you know when your God has answered your prayers or not? Or, does your God answer the prayers of other religions? If not, how do you account for their perceived answered prayers? Often, I'm not even actively arguing with these individuals. Yet, that line of reasoning was still part of my thought process. I get that their argument is wrong, but how do I prove that it's wrong? What I should have been recognizing was that the statement that they made was no more than a claim. Recognizing this, I can discuss or think about the more important topic: how to determine that that specific claim has any truth or validity to it before granting it any worth. I can ask the person how they determine the claim to be true, or why they find it more reasonable than the other claims. Or I could just assert outright that what they said was a claim, which they will need to back up. The conversation turns from validating or giving credence to the claim by exploring it to either determining a reliable method to testing their statement, or maybe just dismissing the argument because they've done nothing more than just make a claim without evidence, and therefore there's no need for me to accept it. If I'm actually in a conversation with this individual versus just hearing them say something, I wouldn't typically pick the latter option, which was just to dismiss it as a claim outright until evidence is presented. But sometimes conversations turn into arguments, or some people just aren't interested in dialogue that is critical to their point of view, making it difficult or fruitless to move forward. That would be one of those times where I might use the latter tactic. Typically, again, though, this is more about my mindset and how I approach interpreting this statement internally rather than whether or not I'm responding to the individual externally. Okay, so let's look at another claim. Personal experience. I know the God of whatever my religion is real because I have a personal relationship with them. I personally experience them in my life. This one seems really, really tough because how do you refute someone's personal experience? Well, to start, however you did it, I would do so carefully. I would assume that they are genuinely having that experience, whether it's feeling inspiration, hope, or guidance when they pray, feeling a presence when they are sad or lonely, or coming to a difficult solution or decision shortly after having prayed, and so on. The first place that a lot of people want to go when a religious person says that they hear God or have a personal experience with deities, such as conversations or interactions, is to their mental health. That is a very real possibility and one that may need to be considered. If the person needs professional help or guidance, we should not ever brush it off as just a religious belief. We should encourage them to get help. So I really want to tread carefully here because that can be a very, very fine line to walk. But I wouldn't start there in a conversation with another person. The majority of people, and in fact every person I've ever talked to personally, is not describing anything related to a mental health issue. So I'm going to approach this argument as though I've already determined the person is not suffering from a mental health issue, or that I have no reason to believe that they are. I want to look at just the argument and determine its veracity, because it seems on the surface as though this one has evidence to back it up. Personal experience. Right off the cuff, there are a couple of issues. First, we already know that as a data processing machine, the human brain is incredibly inefficient. In other words, we don't process information as precisely as we think we do. Our brains make mistakes all the time. We have a tendency to categorize and explain and recategorize and re-explain everything in accordance with our current understanding. And when we can't do that, we love to fill in the gaps with our own hypotheses, or even the bad hypotheses of others. This is fine as a starting point from which to look for more information, a way to prove the hypotheses wrong or back them up. Where it gets tricky is when we only get as far as the hypothesis, and then we decide that it feels so right, or it makes so much sense that it is the most likely correct assumption, or even worse, that it is a fact. If you're having an experience, it is so personal, so real, so undeniable, that it can be very, very difficult to challenge your interpretation of that experience. That brings me to my next point. Not only do our brains make mistakes or hasty assumptions, not only do we fill in the gaps with guesses that feel really right, we also do this differently. Okay, let me word that a little more carefully. It is common for humans to have an experience that they don't understand. And it is common for humans to try and explain or justify the experience, even in the absence of evidence. Something like, oh, I don't know what it was, but I know what it was. The catch. We tend to explain our experiences in terms of our own social, cultural, and religious beliefs. Each person's experience quite conveniently reinforces or justifies their worldview, yet these worldviews can't all be right. In short, if personal experience can be thrown out there and works to justify everyone's religious belief or lack thereof, then you can't use it to justify any of them. Like my first example, an easy way to approach this is to break down the statement. I know there is a God because I have a personal relationship with him. You've made a claim, but no more. How can you demonstrate to me that your claim has credence? That it is somehow different or more reliable than the claim made by a person of another religion? You've made a claim, not an argument. Now we can explore how to falsify the claim, rather than trying to dig in and dismantle the argument. But what do I mean when I say, if it is evidence for everyone's claim, it's evidence for none? So here's an example. Imagine you have 5 suspects for a robbery. Oddly enough, for the purpose of this example, the only piece of evidence that you have for the suspect is that the person has brown hair. If one of the individuals has brown hair, the evidence points more toward that individual than the others, although it still doesn't prove that they did it. But if they all have brown hair, the evidence cannot be used to determine which of the individuals is responsible, if any at all. Every day we are faced with information, and we have to decide whether that information is true or not. Most of it we end up just taking at face value. If there's anything that we have learned recently, it is that we just can't do that. We have to be able to call a fact, a hypothesis, and a claim. And we have to be able to recognize what is evidence and what isn't. We have to stop giving claims more credence and respect than they deserve. We have to be able to determine the difference between all these things. If it's a claim like God answers my prayers, I don't have to disprove it or treat the argument with the same respect as facts or even hypotheses, which are at least supported by some evidence. I can shift my mindset and approach each statement differently depending on how reliable the statement is. Now, before you get too excited or too discouraged, this isn't a magic solution that will make all the arguments go away. It isn't a silver bullet to use in discourse to say, gotcha, what you said was just a claim. It is a means of shifting your own perspective away from giving bad claims good footing in a conversation or even in your mental space, toward acknowledging what kind of a statement is a claim and treating it as such. So whether I'm conversing with an individual or just reflecting on what I heard them say or saw posted, I can guide my response, internal or external, in a more productive direction toward how can we determine something said to be true. If you want more information on what approaches you can take externally in these kinds of conversations, I recommend Anthony Magnabosco's channel and webpage on street epistemology. Both are linked below. There are also great resources on how to form arguments and how to analyze them for what kind of an argument they are. I've included some links, including Anthony Magnabosco's, in the description below. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching.
I could have listed so many other shows. There are so many great content creators out there. In fact, if people enjoy this episode, I might just do another one. I'd like to thank everyone on this list for allowing me to use their content. They have been so gracious in allowing me to share their material with my own followers. I urge you to spend some time following the links below to go and visit their own channels and websites. Please show them the appreciation they deserve. Of all the content I have shown, there is only one that I haven't managed to get express permission to use. I just couldn't get a hold of them. So I have cited their material in the way I see appropriate, and if they see this and object in any way, please contact me and I will re-edit the show to either recite or remove your content. Finally, remember I told you that Talk Heathen had the most inspiring caller I have ever heard on a call-in show? Well, I've managed to contact him through a mutual friend, and he's kindly allowed me to show his call here. I wanted to get special permission from him because despite having seen this clip tens of times, I genuinely cry every time I watch it. See the Facebook page for details of what's coming up. I'm going to leave you with this last clip and then we're rolling the credits. Kamal, thank you, my friend. You are truly an inspiration to everybody in this community.
Kamal in Alabama. You're talking to Eric and V. How are you doing? Kamal in Alabama. You're live. I think Kamal may have walked away, from the phone. Yeah. So I'm going to pop you back on hold.
Here I go.
Oh, there you are.
Oh, there you are.
Lovely.
Hey.
I'm sorry. I hit the mute button by mistake.
Not a problem.
That's all right.
Happens to me all the time.
Yeah. What would you like to
How
talk
y'all
about?
doing today?
Doing good. How are you?
Oh, and happy birthday to your friend, Eric. That was cool. You shout her out like that. I like that. I like them.
Right.
My friends when it's like that. So
She was as red. She was as red as this shirt. It's amazing. She's going to whoop my butt after the show. So, what would you like to talk about?
Okay. A while back, when Hurricane Michael, I don't know if you guys remember that. Hurricane Michael happened. I'm from Detroit. I'm originally from Detroit, and all my family is there. And Hurricane Michael was kind of rough on. It wasn't as bad as it was in Panama and places like that. Mm-hmm. But I did have a tree fall on my house. So, and I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I was wounded in combat. I am in a wheelchair. I am an atheist.
Thank you for your service.
Oh, you're welcome. Absolutely. I finally said, my brother said, you know, God is watching out for you or something to that effect. And I finally, for the first time, I finally said, brother, I don't believe in God, man. Why do you keep saying that stuff to me?
Mm-hmm.
I really thought he knew.
Yeah.
And the phone got quiet, and he didn't say anything to me. And he said, let me call you back. And it caught me off guard. And then he finally did call me back, and he said, man, what's this about you not believing in God stuff? And I said, but I've been this way for over 10 years, man. What do you know, what's the big deal? Well, I realized what the big deal. I realized because I haven't talked to my brothers since. They don't call. They don't. They don't write. They don't do anything. I don't talk to them anymore. And it's not because I'm not reaching out. They tell me that, you know, religion doesn't separate families. Well, bullshit. It does.
Yeah.
Because
it separated yours.
Don't talk to me anymore.
Yeah.
Just a show of hands.
And it hurts, brother.
Just
it
to show.
I don't know. I'm sorry.
No. I'm sorry. I talked over you. Please finish.
No, I was just saying it hurts, man. It hurts, and I'm the oldest in the family, and you know I feel like I don't know. I don't understand why do people feel like what do they think we are? Why don't they think we can't have morals, and why do they think that we're bad people or I don't understand, man. My heart is I can't even actually form the words I want to say. I'm just devastated because my family don't. I said, well, brother, I was the same person I was before I told you that. What makes me such a bad person now? And he's constantly quoting Bible verses to me and all this crap. And what do I say to that? You know, what do I say?
Yeah.
I try to give him my point of view. I mean, I know most every atheist thinks differently, but it's basically the same. And I try to tell him I just don't have proof. I don't believe that there's a God because no God has ever spoken to me. I've never seen a demon. I've never seen an angel. I don't know what you want me to do.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, man. I can't even form the words I really want to say. I feel like I'm kind of off, but
don't apologize.
No. Yeah. Here at the Free Thought Library, we get people who come in every single week with that story, and it never gets easier, and it's fucking heartbreaking. I'm seeing a lot of people
I don't know what to say to him anymore. I don't know what to. I try to call and shit. I try to call and talk to him, man, but I feel like I don't know. I don't know what to say to him. I want to talk and try to explain it, but is it going to help? You know, I feel like I'm the one that I feel like I did something wrong or some shit, man.
You didn't do anything wrong.
Just being who I am, and I feel like I did something wrong. It hurts like a motherfucker. I'm sorry. Pardon my language.
No, you can say fuck. That's all right. That is a good time to say fuck.
Exactly. If it was ever warranted.
Yeah.
I don't talk to some family members anymore. There are some who only talk to me to try and get me back. And the thing that I would say, and I can't say much, because this is a very profound pain and a very intense hurt. It's not you. Nothing about this situation reflects at all on you, not what you did, and not even how they see you. I guarantee their concern is selfish. There are people, Christians out there, who believe that if they even interact with somebody who is not of the faith, they are putting themselves in spiritual harm. It doesn't matter if they love the other person, it could break their heart. They might be in just as much pain as you are, but they are afraid and they are selfish and they are putting their own what they believe to be spiritual well-being above the relationship. And while that doesn't make it easier, the silence does not mean that they hate you or that they think that you're an immoral person. It means that they are afraid and that they are being selfish with this relationship.
Yeah. And I mean, I can tell you from, therapy that you are not responsible for their actions. You can't own their actions, and it hurts, but they need to take ownership of what they're doing. Kamal.
Yeah, it does.
If you go back and check out the live chat, you've gotten so much fucking love. The thing is right now, man, we're living in a time where we need to be family for each other. And I know you have family here. That it doesn't.
I have a cousin. I'm sorry, man. I just wanted to
go get it out.
One more
get it
thing,
out.
and I'll let you go. Shit. I do have family members about an hour and a half away from me in Georgia, and this is my second cousin, man. This is my uncle. My uncle's wife and my cousin. They live in Georgia, maybe about an hour away from me, man. And this past Thanksgiving and Christmas, and I don't really care about holidays and stuff like that, man. But it would have been nice because I hadn't seen my family in a while, but they were coming to see me. And after that, it was they were an hour away. They didn't call me. My sister had an excuse, something about she twisted her ankle or some crap, and I mean, really, I'm an hour away. Your big brother's in a wheelchair. I haven't seen him in a while, and I couldn't take an hour to come. I would have went to them, but they didn't even invite me. Yeah. I want to say fuck them, man. I really do, but
it hurts.
I love them, man. It's my family.
Come on. It's okay to hurt. It's understandable. No. Do you know how many I got a message from the back. The crew want to send you some love. And I know it doesn't help right now. But we've got to be there for each other. Because you're not the only one. Right. And the reason earlier I was trying to talk about, over here is because it's fucking heartbreaking. People are losing their families. And I've met so many of them. You're not alone. That people lose their siblings, their parents, their children, and they find that we've got to be there for each other, and we're here for you. Come on, I'm so sorry.
Thanks a lot. I really appreciate it.
Dude, it's just words. I if I were there, I'd give you the biggest fucking hug right now, and I think that everyone here would. You're not alone. You're not alone. We're sending you as much love as we can.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I feel. All right, y'all take it easy.
You too.
you.